All right, good afternoon. I'd like to share with you a little bit about our next practice, which is being highlighted today with regards to people labs and experimentation. And so we know in the automotive industry that our industry will change more in the next decade than it has in the last century. So it'll change more in the next 10 years than ever in our existence. And in order for us to stay relevant as a company, we knew we needed to expand our business model. And so, very similar to many of you, we will always stay true to who we are at our core. Many of the terms I've heard are legacy, but we will always build cars, utilities, and trucks for that end consumer, hopefully many of you in the room, and we'll also be financing them. However, as we shift from being just an automotive company to being automotive and mobility, we're spending time on the left-hand side of this infinity in that emerging space. And so that's mobility, that's electrification, that's autonomy. And the other shift for us, in addition to that 1 foot in today core and 1 foot in tomorrow, emerging and mobility, is the premise that everything falls within the customer experience. And so we're a product-driven company, and we want to be a customer-centric company in a way that perhaps we haven't been in the past. And so if we want to expand our business model, we knew we had to spend time working on our vision and working on our strategy. Because before we define our work, we've got to define our strategy. And so our HR team was very involved in helping facilitate this strategic planning with our CEO, Mark Fields, and his leadership team. But we spend the majority of our time as a function on the top row and the bottom row. And as we, as a company, approached where are we going to play, because we can't play everywhere. And part of what determines where we play is determining if we can win and how we can win. And so with our vision being making people's lives better by changing the way the world moves, we know that that is a further progression and a further evolution of our company. And you can see with the bottom row, we may or may not have the key capabilities we need in this future world. We know we have them for our core, but we need to develop them for our future. And we also don't know what that means beyond those technical capabilities, but for our leaders and how we may need our leaders to show up differently. And at our core, we don't know that we're organized properly. And so we've been spending a lot of time in this space within HR. However, if the company's initiative is making people's lives better, we HR needed to revisit our vision. And our vision is making people's lives better too. But the people that we're most focused on are our internal people, our employees. And so we knew we wanted to make employees' lives better by changing 3 fundamental things. The way we think about work, because we frame work differently. Not the way HR people think about work, the way our employees think about work. The way they feel about their work, and creating that empathy and that connection to the work that they're doing and the value and the purpose that they're doing. And then the way we do our work differently. And so part of our innovative approach to coming up with our people strategy around this space, historically, like maybe many of you, you'd pull your HR leadership team together, you'd have multiple offsites over the course of several years, you'd come up with that people strategy. And we knew, A, we didn't have the time, but we also knew that as a leadership team, our view of the world was incomplete. And so instead, we launched what we called our People Lab. We brought 7 employees from around the world together from all levels of the organization. So one of our members was on our HR leadership team, and at the other end of the continuum, we had a college graduate who'd been with us for just a little over a year. They were together in a conference room in Dearborn, Michigan for 3 weeks, and this is what they focused their time and attention on. However, their span and their scope was global. And so they stayed connected with us as an HR leadership team through WeChat. They sent us a video every night because it was quicker and easier than typing an email on their progress to share the exciting things that they talked about. They spent time doing external and internal benchmarking, and we did some pre-work partnering with some consultants to make sure that we weren't just navel-gazing, right? That we weren't just looking at what our view was, but we were understanding the trends in the industry. We made sure that we attended to the voice of the customer through multiple different mediums. We did crowdsourcing around what were important to all of our employees around the world. We did polling. We analyzed our existing engagement and pulse surveys, and we did focus groups. So these 7 people sanctioned work that then our HR community around the world did for them real time, feeding back into that room. They revisited our employment value proposition, because if we're shifting and becoming more customer-centric and focusing on people's lives and employment lives, perhaps our value proposition needed to change. And they also recognized that given the hundreds of thousands of employees that we have, that one size can't fit all. And so we developed personas to help us be more targeted and more fit for purpose in our solutions. They looked at all of our people processes to make sure they were more integrated from a customer experience perspective. We think we're pretty good in the vertical, but we're not so good horizontally connecting all of those different distinct events. We were agile and iterative, and we use a phrase, minimal viable product. And for any of you who are type A or who were A-grade students that were 80-20, you've got a physical reaction to that because that doesn't sound like good work. We had to get better at good enough and prototyping and iterating and improving as we go. We talked about some employee shifts, which I'll share with you, and we wanted to make sure to never lose the purpose in the process. And so we had the customer at the center of everything we did. And that customer is a global customer. Many of you might be from global companies, and I didn't realize how ignorant of an American I was until I didn't live in America anymore. And not everything can be invented in Dearborn, Michigan for our global team. And so we made sure that this team in the room was truly global. So what are some of the things that they delivered? They delivered something called our employee shifts. And this was based on the voice of our employees. And every redesign of any people process that we do and any communication that we take honors these shifts. And so you can see from an empowerment standpoint, we're very compliance-driven. And how do we shift from compliance to setting that expectation? What's your 50%? What's my 50%? From being very highly controlled, which typically means closed chest and unwilling to share, to being more transparent. From an employee-focused perspective, that one-size-fits-all that I mentioned, and moving to a more fit-for-purpose solution for a region, for a demographic, for a particular team, and moving from being process-centric to employee-centric. At the bottom, and we talked about this earlier today with respect to collaboration, making sure that our incentives and our measurements aren't just individual, but we're turning up the volume on the value and the importance of teams and on partnerships. Being a family-owned company for over a century, it's easy to be paternalistic, but it's not us taking care of you as our children, it's the partnership that we have in that employment equation. And finally, making sure that everything we do is integrated and streamlined. It's agile, it's iterative, and where possible, it's as simple as we can make it. So to test this agile and iterative process, on some topics, which are those that are on many of our minds, we weren't aligned. The benchmarking can go either way, and our internal HR leadership team and operations leaders went both ways. We had polarizing views around things like performance management, feedback, ratings, team versus individual. So we did experiments. You may ask, what's the difference between an experiment and a pilot? And it's an important question, and one that I didn't fully understand until we launched into this. But an experiment is scientific. It has a hypothesis, and we developed statistically significant size groups, so we knew that whatever the outcome would be representative if we were to deploy it more broadly. We had control groups, and we partnered with professors from the University of Michigan to help us design these experiments to make sure that they were scientific in nature and that the results would be valid. We thought, as an HR leadership team, that we wanted to test eliminating performance reviews. But when we gathered voice of the customer about what was important, what we heard from our employees was they wanted differentiated experiences, and they wanted to move our rating scale even greater than it was. We have 4 points, they wanted 5 points. So be careful what you ask for, because if you ask, you've got to be willing to listen. And so we tested both. And we increased our differentiation, and we also eliminated. And we've got experiments underway. We also did performance feedback. And we had found a trend was around using an app to provide feedback. This horribly failed. Our hypothesis was it would give greater 360 feedback, more transparent, more real-time, and it didn't work at all, which we found as a success, actually, because we didn't spend a lot of money, we didn't launch something that then failed or damaged our brand, and we got real-time feedback from employees around how they value receiving feedback, and it wasn't through automation. More to come on Experiment 4, and we're partnering and learning more on Rob Cross's material, as he shared with you, and with i4cp, to look at how we develop a network of teams approach. Sorry. We're also using this work around our own transformation for our own function. And so we're on a multi-year transformation to be more customer-centric as an HR team. Everything up to now I've shared with you is our people strategy. This is on our HR strategy, but it's very much in line with those shifts. And so what did we learn? First of all, we are proud of our progress thus far, but we are far from done. But these are some important things that I'll highlight, and nothing that you haven't heard up to now, by the way, from the other speakers. The first is any shift in people strategy needs to be directly connected to the business strategy. And if your leaders are asking you to develop a business strategy, to develop a people strategy, but a business strategy doesn't exist, I would suggest your first job is to help them develop that business strategy. Because nothing you do around people is relevant if it's not directly tied to the business. Engage a cross-section of global leaders, and it can't just be the senior leaders, because often we're too disconnected or removed from the day-to-day work and the people. Multi-medium approach, fostering that culture of innovation, simplicity, agility, and transparency. One size fits all. So when Alan Mulally came, and essentially we saved Ford Motor Company over a period of time, if we would say one size doesn't fit all, that's almost heresy, because what saved us was one Ford, one team, one plan. But what we found is you can have both, but we can't design something for hundreds of thousands of employees that's common, standard, and global always. And finally, being employee-centric and putting employees at the center of everything we do, but not without accountability and empowerment. So thanks for the chance to share our experience, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the coming days.